The crystal glasses clinked as my mother-in-law raised her third glass of expensive wine. I sat quietly, watching her gesture dramatically while addressing our extended family at what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner for my husband James' promotion. You see, she slurred slightly. James could have married Caroline Mitchell. Her father owns half of downtown Chicago. She shot me a pointed look. Instead, he chose a teacher. The way she said teacher made it sound like a communicable disease. I maintained my composure, just as my father had taught me during countless business negotiations. Keep your cards close, he'd always said. The right moment reveals itself. My husband shifted uncomfortably beside me but said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. It had been getting louder over our 2 years of marriage. Sarah, my sister-in-law, Amanda chimed in, her voice dripping with fake concern. Don't you think it's time you considered a more prestigious career? Teaching kindergarten hardly befits the wife of a Morgan Stanley executive. I took a small sip of water, hiding my smile. If they only knew that the private school where I taught was one that my family's foundation had established. Teaching wasn't my career, it was my passion project. Perhaps, my father-in-law added, swirling his bourbon, you could work at James's firm. Though, he chuckled, you'd need quite a bit more education first. What was your degree in again? Elementary education. I thought about my MBA from Harvard and my Ph.D. in educational leadership from Stanford, both carefully kept off my public records at my request. I'd wanted to make my own way, find someone who loved me for myself. Now I was starting to wonder if I'd taken the experiment too far. Actually, I began, but James interrupted. Sarah's job is fine for now, he said dismissively. Once we have children, she won't be working anyway. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. This was new. We'd always agreed I would continue teaching, children or not. My mother-in-law practically glowed with approval. Finally talking sense, James. A proper wife stays home, especially in our circle. Though, she gave me another dismissive look. I suppose Sarah wouldn't know much about proper society. I thought about the charity galas I'd grown up attending, the meetings with world leaders I'd sat in on since I was 16, the Fortune 500 company I was set to inherit. All carefully hidden when I decided to live a normal life and find genuine love. Did you see Caroline at the club last week? Amanda pressed on. She just became partner at her law firm. And that tennis instructor she's dating, so much more sophisticated than a public school teacher. Actually, I teach at Westbrook Academy, I corrected quietly. My mother-in-law nearly choked on her wine. Westbrook, that elite private school. How did you manage that? Those positions are impossible to get unless you have connections. Or actual talent, I replied evenly, earning a sharp look from James. Sarah, he warned under his breath. What connections could you possibly have? Amanda scoffed. Your father is what was it again? Middle management somewhere in Texas? I thought of my father, CEO of one of the largest technology companies in the world, currently in his private jet heading to this very city for tomorrow's board meeting. The same father who taught me that true character reveals itself when people think you have nothing to offer them. Speaking of connections, my mother-in-law continued, James, Caroline mentioned she'd love to catch up. Perhaps at the Morgan Stanley charity gala next month. Sarah, dear, I'm afraid it's invite only, very exclusive. I almost laughed. The gala was being held at one of my family's hotels, and half the charitable donations would be matched by our foundation. Mother, James said, straightening his tie, I've been meaning to mention. I'll be taking Caroline as my plus one. For networking purposes, of course. The room fell silent. I set down my water glass carefully, the weight of my hidden phone in my pocket suddenly very noticeable. The phone with my father's private number, the one that could change everything with a single call. Networking purposes, I repeated softly. Don't take it personally, Sarah, Amanda said with false sympathy. It's just business. You wouldn't understand. It's a different world. My world, actually. The world had stepped away from to find something real, only to discover I'd found something far more artificial than the society I'd left behind. James, my father-in-law, declared, is finally thinking like a Morgan Stanley executive. Sometimes we have to set aside personal considerations for business success. I watched my husband preen under his family's approval, saw the way he deliberately avoided my eyes. 2 years of marriage, and I finally seen enough. Excuse me for a moment, I said politely, standing up. I need to make a call. Oh, Sarah, my mother-in-law laughed. Don't be dramatic. This is how our world works. If you want to be part of this family, you need to accept certain realities. I stepped away from the table, my fingers already dialing my father's number. It rang once. Princess, my father's familiar voice answered. Everything okay? Daddy, I said, loud enough for the table to hear. Remember how you said your jet would be landing in Chicago tonight? Could you make a slight detour? The silence behind me was deafening. Of course, sweetheart. Send me the coordinates. Everything all right? It will be, I replied. And Daddy, bring the papers we discussed last week. I think it's time. I turned back to the table. James had gone pale, recognition finally dawning in his eyes. My mother-in-law was frozen, wine glass halfway to her lips. Sarah, James started, who exactly was that? I smiled, channeling every society event, every board meeting, every moment I'd watched my father command a room. That was just my middle management father. The one from Texas? I pulled out my real phone, not the basic model I'd been using, but the latest prototype from my father's company, not even on the market yet. Though you might know him better as the CEO of Tech Global Industries. And those papers he's bringing, they're the ones showing that the exclusive hotel hosting your charity gala belongs to my family's hospitality group. The sound of a helicopter approaching cut through the stunned silence. Right on time. Daddy always did have a flair for the dramatic. Oh, and James, I added, slipping off my wedding ring. About taking Caroline to the gala, don't worry about it. As the actual owner of the venue, I'll be handling the guest list personally. I don't think either of you will be attending. My father-in-law sputtered, but James's position at Morgan Stanley requires good relationships with major clients. I finished for him. Interesting you should mention that. Tech Global's investment banking business is quite substantial. I wonder which would concern Morgan Stanley more. A junior executive taking his ex-wife's rival to a gala or potentially losing one of their biggest tech clients. The helicopter was landing now, its lights illuminating the restaurant's private garden where we'd been dining. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see my father stepping out, impeccable in his business suit despite the late hour. That's impossible, Amanda whispered. Your father. He's the man whose biography you claimed was required reading in your MBA program last Christmas? I supplied. Yes, that was rather awkward, wasn't it? Especially since you just spent an hour explaining to me how simple teachers couldn't grasp complex business concepts. The restaurant's manager rushed in flustered. Ms. Harrison, your father, Mr. Harrison, we had no idea. Sarah, my mother-in-law stood up, suddenly sober. Darling, we were just teasing. You know we consider you family. Family? I picked up my purse, a simple design that probably cost more than their monthly mortgage. I don't think so. Family doesn't treat teachers, or anyone, as beneath them. Family doesn't arrange dates with ex-girlfriends for their married son. And family, I met each of their eyes in turn, doesn't measure worth by bank accounts or social connections. My father entered the room, his commanding presence filling the space. 2 decades running a global corporation had taught him how to make an entrance. Princess, he smiled warmly, then turned a cooler gaze on my in-laws. I believe we have some matters to discuss. Daddy, I replied, matching his tone perfectly, years of boarding school and society events taking over. I believe we do. Starting with James' rather ambitious plans for the Morgan Stanley Gala. The color drained from James's face. Sarah, baby, let me explain. Mr. Thompson, my father interrupted, addressing James's father. I believe your firm handles the legal work for the venue. We'll be making some changes to that arrangement, effective immediately. My mother-in-law knocked over her wine glass, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like a prediction of things to come. I walked over to stand beside my father, feeling the familiar security of his presence. I wanted to find someone who loved me for myself, I told the stunned table. Instead, I found people who showed their true colors when they thought I had nothing to offer. Thank you for that lesson. It's one my father taught me years ago, but I needed to learn it for myself. The helicopter's blades were still spinning, waiting to take us away from this scene, away from 2 years of pretending to be less than I was. Sarah, James tried one last time. Everything I did, All my hard work at Morgan Stanley was helped by connections you never knew you had. I finished for him. Did you never wonder why you got that promotion so quickly? Tech Global has been one of Morgan Stanley's biggest clients for years. Daddy thought it would be nice to give my husband's career a little boost. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Everything he'd been proud of, everything he'd lorded over me. The apartment too, I added, almost as an afterthought. The one you love showing off. It's in a building owned by our real estate division. I arranged the exclusive opportunity through a shell company. I wanted you to have a home you loved. Princess. My father checked his watch. The board is waiting. Of course, I smiled. We shouldn't keep him waiting. After all, tomorrow's meeting is rather important. We're discussing moving our investment banking business to a new firm. I'm sure Morgan Stanley will be interested in that development. As we walked out, my mother-in-law found her voice. All this time, you were the low-class teacher you loved to mock. I finished for her. No, I was the woman who chose to live simply because she wanted to find genuine love. My mistake was staying quiet when I discovered I found anything but. The helicopter lifted off, leaving behind a stunned family, a ruined dinner, and my old life. Through the window, I could see James standing in the garden, watching us ascend. He looked small from up here, smaller than I'd ever seen him. You okay, Princess? My father asked over the headset. I thought about the past 2 years, about quiet dinners enduring subtle jabs, about watching the man I loved slowly reveal his true character. I will be, I replied. And Daddy, thank you for letting me learn this lesson on my own. He squeezed my hand, understanding in his eyes. Below us, Chicago's lights twinkled, reminding me of all the society events I'd attended in those same buildings. It was time to stop hiding, time to be who I really was. My phone buzzed. James, probably realizing what tomorrow's board meeting could mean for his career. I declined the call and opened my email instead. I had a guest list to revise for an upcoming gala after all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about finally standing up and showing your true worth. As the helicopter turned toward our penthouse, I smiled, thinking about tomorrow's board meeting. James and his family had wanted someone more prestigious in their lives. They were about to get exactly what they wished for, just not in a way they'd imagined. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows as I prepared for the board meeting. My assistant Maria was updating me on the night's developments. Your mother-in-law, well, soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, has called 17 times, she reported, scrolling through her tablet. James called 32 times and sent 48 texts. His father tried reaching the board members directly, but she smiled slightly. Apparently none of them are taking his calls. I smoothed down my Chanel suit, no more hiding in department store clothes, and checked my reflection. And Caroline Mitchell canceled her RSVP to the gala the moment the news broke. Apparently, she suddenly remembered a pressing engagement in Europe. I laughed softly. Amazing how quickly people's priorities shift when they realize who they've been dealing with. My phone buzzed with another text from James. Baby, please. I had no idea. We can work this out. I love you for you, not your money. Really? I murmured, remembering his smirk when he'd announced taking Caroline to the gala. Funny how that love appears right after learning about my bank account. The elevator announced my father's arrival. He strode in, already dressed for the board meeting, his presence filling the room just as it had last night at the restaurant. Princess, he greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, ready to show them what a simple teacher can do. I grinned, feeling more like myself than I had in 2 years. More than ready. Maria, what's the status on the Morgan Stanley situation? Their CEO has been trying to reach you since 5 a.m., Maria replied. The possibility of losing Tech Global's business has them in quite a panic, especially given the circumstances. The circumstances being that my husband, a junior executive who'd been fast-tracked due to my hidden influence, had planned to humiliate his wife at their biggest charity event of the year. The same wife who turned out to be the daughter of one of their largest clients. James's direct supervisor called as well, Maria continued. Apparently, they're reevaluating his recent promotion. Speaking of reevaluation, my father interjected, the lawyers finished reviewing the apartment lease. As the actual owner of the building, you're well within your rights, though. No, I interrupted softly. Let him keep the apartment. I want him to live there, surrounded by luxury he thought he earned, knowing that every square foot was actually a gift from the wife he underestimated. My father's proud smile told me he approved of this particular form of revenge. The helicopter was waiting on the rooftop to take us to Tech Global's headquarters. As we flew over the city, I thought about how different everything looked from up here, just like how differently James's family would see me now. The board meeting was everything I'd hoped for. Sitting at my father's right hand, I presented our company's new educational technology initiative. The real reason I'd been teaching at Westbrook Academy. My pilot program had increased student achievement by 40% while reducing costs by half. This is why, my father announced to the board, Sarah will be taking over as CEO of our educational division, effective immediately. The news would be public by evening. I could already imagine James's family seeing the headlines. Tech Global CEO's daughter revolutionizes education technology. My phone buzzed again during a break. Amanda this time. Sarah, we treated you so badly. We had no idea you were, you know. I deleted the message without responding. They still didn't get it. My worth hadn't changed. Their perception had, and that revealed everything about their character. After the meeting, my father's secretary handed me a stack of messages. James's father had apparently spent the morning calling every contact he had, trying to prevent his son's career implosion. But words travel fast in financial circles, and the story was too juicy to contain. Rising executive takes mystery woman to gala instead of wife. Wife turns out to be boss's daughter. The gala planning committee called, Maria reported. They'd like to confirm you'll be taking over as chair, given your family's significant involvement. I smiled, remembering my mother-in-law's smug assertion that I couldn't possibly attend such an exclusive event. Confirm it. And Maria? Make sure they understand there will be some changes to the guest list. That evening, I returned to the penthouse to find James waiting in the lobby. The security team looked at me questioningly. They'd known who I was all along, of course. Part of my father's insistence on protecting me even during my normal life experiment. Let him up, I decided. Time to finish this. James looked terrible, designer suit wrinkled, hair unkempt. The man who sat so smugly at dinner last night was gone, replaced by someone desperately trying to salvage his carefully constructed world. Sarah, baby, please, he started the moment the elevator doors opened. You have to understand. I was under so much pressure from my family. I never meant to hurt you. Really? I moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city. So you weren't going to take Caroline to the gala, weren't going to humiliate me in front of everyone? That was just business. He protested. I needed to network, to build connections. I was doing it for us. No, I turned to face him. You were doing it for yourself. Just like you've always done. Tell me something, James. In 2 years of marriage, did you ever wonder how you got that apartment? How your career advanced so quickly? Did you ever think maybe your simple wife might have been more than she seemed? He paled. I just thought I was doing well, making the right impressions. The right impressions, I repeated softly. Like looking down on teachers, treating people as worthless if they don't have the right connections. Is that what makes a good impression? Sarah, please. We can start over. Now that I know who you really are. That's exactly the problem. I cut him off. You only care who I am now that you know about the money, the position, the power. Last night, I was beneath you. Today, you're begging for another chance. What changed, James? Not me. I'm exactly the same person. You're the one who's different. But I love you, he tried. No, I replied calmly. You love what I can do for your career. There's a difference. You know what's interesting, James? In 2 years, you never once asked why I chose to teach. Never wondered if maybe I had bigger plans, bigger dreams. You just assumed you knew my worth based on my job title. His face crumpled. I'll lose everything. My job, my position in society. You mean the job you got because of my family's connections? The position in society that came from an apartment I provided? Are you worried about losing things that were never really yours to begin with? The elevator dinged and Maria stepped out. Miss Harrison, the gala committee is waiting for your decisions on the revised guest list. James flinched at the formal address, finally understanding just how much had changed. The apartment is yours, I told him quietly. Stay as long as you like. Consider it a reminder of what happens when you judge people by appearances. I turned to Maria. Please show him out. And James? Don't bother calling again. My simple teacher's salary might not have been much, but it taught me exactly what you and your family really value. After he left, I sat down to review the gala guest list. A small part of me was tempted to exclude them all. James, his family, Caroline. But I had a better idea. Maria, I called, confirm their invitations. All of them, but update the seating chart. I want them at the back, at the smallest table we have. And your seat? She asked with a knowing smile. Head table, of course. Next to the mayor. Oh, and Maria, make sure the press knows about Tech Global's new educational division CEO. I think it's time for my first public interview. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. The story hit the media exactly as I'd planned. Local girl makes good, secret CEO's daughter revolutionizes education. My mother-in-law's bridge club couldn't stop talking about it. According to my sources, Amanda's social media went suspiciously quiet. The night of the gala arrived, and I made sure every detail was perfect. My designer gown, my father on my arm, photographers capturing every moment. And there, at a tiny table near the kitchen doors, sat James and his family, watching as I commanded the room they'd once thought I couldn't even enter. Sarah, my mother-in-law, tried to approach during cocktail hour, but my security team, no longer hidden, smoothly intercepted her. Ms. Harrison is greeting the mayor. They informed her politely but firmly. Perhaps you could return to your assigned table? I gave my keynote speech about educational innovation and our company's commitment to social responsibility. Looking out over the crowd, I could see James at his small table, Caroline conspicuously absent from his side. He'd lost his promotion at Morgan Stanley. I'd heard that they kept him on in a reduced role. Nobody wanted to completely anger Tech Global's CEO. My time teaching, I told the assembled crowd, taught me that true worth isn't about titles or bank accounts. It's about character, about how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. I saw my former in-laws wince, recognizing their own words thrown back at them. After the gala, Maria handed me the evening's donation total, a record amount naturally. Your former mother-in-law tried to join the planning committee for next year, she mentioned with a smirk. Let me guess, she suddenly has a deep appreciation for education. Something like that. Oh, and James's sister Amanda sent another message. She'd love to get coffee, just us girls. I slipped into the waiting car, leaving the gala and its bitter memories behind. You know what's funny, Maria? 2 months ago, they wouldn't even let me sit at their dinner table. Now they're begging to sit at mine. And will you let them? She asked. I thought about it, remembering every snide comment, every dismissive look. No, I decided. Some lessons need to be permanent. Let them keep their small table by the kitchen. It's a good reminder that character reveals itself when people think you have nothing to offer them. The divorce was finalized quietly, though the story had already made the rounds of Chicago society. James kept the apartment as I'd planned. Living in luxury he now knew was actually mine. His family maintained their social positions, barely, though they were noticeably absent from the most exclusive events. Events that, ironically, I now helped plan. 1 year later, I sat in my office at Tech Global's educational division, reviewing the success of our pilot program. We'd expanded to 50 schools, changing thousands of lives. On my desk sat a framed magazine cover, my first major interview, titled The Teacher Who Changed Education. My phone buzzed with a text from James. I miss you. I understand now what I lost. I didn't respond. He didn't miss me. He missed the power he discovered too late. Instead, I focused on the latest proposal from our development team. We were revolutionizing educational technology, making quality education accessible to everyone, regardless of social status. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about becoming exactly who you always were, just without hiding it anymore. Let them keep their small table by the kitchen doors. I had bigger dreams to chase and a better story to write. The next time someone asks me what I do for a living, I still say, I'm a teacher. But now I add, I teach people that true worth isn't about what you own or who you know. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. And sometimes, when I'm feeling particularly satisfied, I send James and his family tickets to our company events. Front row seats to watch the simple teacher they dismissed run the world they thought they owned. Because in the end, the best lesson I could teach them was one they taught me first. Character reveals itself when people think you have nothing to offer them. And once that character is revealed, no amount of money or social status can hide it again.